Hello, I'm Sarah. This is Hardcover Hearts, my week of reading wrap-up. This is where I talk about the books that I read this week, what I'm currently reading, and then potentially could read next week based on my mood. So I had a phenomenal, unbelievable week of reading, and I can't wait to tell you about it. First, though, let me apologize for the quality of my voice. It's a little off, but that's because the air quality here in the Bay Area has been so crappy with the fire situation. So we have much better conditions today, and the sun is out. It's not looking like Victorian London. So really excited to finally be able to film this video. So let's start with what I finished this week. The first was an audiobook. This was The Girl Who Wrote Loneliness. And when I mentioned this last week, I erroneously did her name in the Western way, which my apologies. This should be Shin Kyung-Sook, and then it's translated by Han Jun. Apologies for making that mistake. The book cover was westernized and had Kyung-Sook first instead of Shin, as it should be. So this is set in 1970 in Seoul, South Korea, and it's really a semi-autobiographical story of the author as a young girl coming to Seoul from the more rural areas of South Korea, and having to both work and trying to study. This was a time when there was a lot of industrialization happening in South Korea. And so that's all ramping up, and in conflict with that is the ideas of unionizing and labor rights and all of these things that really were not happening in what are in essence sweatshop type conditions. This is a time when stereo equipment and that type of thing was coming out of South Korea at a clip. And that's what she's working on. She's working on a factory line. But really, she wants to be a writer and she wants to go to school. They have to think about the future. They have to think about their family. But there's a lot of pressure to join the union and labor movements. I thought this was a really interesting story. I learned so much. It was very well told, but I think it could have used an editor. It was just a little long. There were a lot of parts in here that just kind of dragged. And in essence, it's a story of the writer who has written about her life, going on a tour and kind of having to see and be asked questions about the book that she's written. So it's like a story in a story. And so we have those two time frames where she's going back and looking at her childhood and how she grew up and kind of came of age in Seoul. Then something that really didn't work for me. Let's talk about it. This is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I know. After Mrs. Dalloway was such an amazing revelatory experience, this one really kind of left me cold. And what you're going to see me talk about, what's so interesting about when you read a lot is you start to draw connections and webs, and it's like a constellation of coincidences that happen. It is a coincidence that this is the second semi-autobiographical novel that appears in this week. Virginia Woolf wrote this about her childhood with her very large family, and they used to go to Cornwall, and there was this big house. But I think that sometimes when you write about your own past and your own history, it can be very confusing and or not alienating, I think, sometimes for other people. And especially if you're trying to write it in a modernist way. So I just didn't connect to this at all. I didn't connect to the relationships. And a lot of the themes in this book are about relationship and nature and time. So these are things that are happening, and I definitely got the feeling that she's trying to work something out here. But as I mentioned, I just couldn't connect. I didn't enjoy any of these characters, and I don't have to like the characters, but I need to have something interesting happening. And for me, it just didn't take root here. We have the Ramseys, the family that in essence is a stand-in for her own family. And we have Lily Briscoe. And Lily Briscoe is supposed to be the kind of the main character here. But we do feel like the main character is really Mrs. Ramsey because she's kind of the center of the family. She's the fulcrum upon which everything operates and moves, and she keeps everything balanced. And all of the, not just the family that lives in this home during the holidays, but also all their visitors who are intellectual people who come to spend time and be in the orbit of Mr. Ramsey, who is considered to be incredibly intelligent. But he's a horrible man. He's just horrible. He's selfish, narcissistic. He's like a child, like an infant in an adult body, in a very intelligent. And he's demanding. He's vain. He's just a horrible person. But Mrs. Ramsey kind of dotes on him, and he's like an extension of her children. And he collects all these people around him to kind of prop himself up. So I was already not really enjoying the first section of it. The second section I found to be quite interesting, where the people recede and we see the home. And the home after a storm has happened, and the passage of time and what it does to this home. And what's fascinating is that the ideas of or the events that happen to the individuals are kind of bracketed like asides. And I thought that was very, very well done, very interesting section. And then we come back and people come back to the home after a period of time. And then we have to talk about her anti-Asian references. So I saw it originally in Mrs. Dalloway, when Mrs. Dalloway is looking at her daughter and she's appraising her and she's calling her she could be attractive, but she had Chinese eyes. And I remember being startled by it there. Well, here it is in full throttle, even more so. Mrs. Ramsey is judging Lily Briscoe, and she mentions over and over again her Chinese eyes, and it's all disparagingly. It's all done poorly. Now, I'm reading the Oxford World Classics edition. This edition has a foreword, an introductory section. It has a biography of her. It has her bibliography. It also has explanatory notes in the back. So I immediately go to the back to see what's going on here. Why is this the second time that I've seen this here? And it says nothing. All it says about it is Chinese eyes. See also pages 24, 74, 85, and 130, and similar stress on Elizabeth Dalloway's Chinese eyes in Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway. And in there it was pages 104 and 114. And it dawned on me that I've never heard any criticism of Virginia Woolf for racist types of views. Now, again, I'm not in the UK, so I know that there have been some, I posted something on Instagram about this, and some people in the UK were like, oh no, this is something that we've known, her anti-Semitism as well as this. But what bothers me is that we don't talk about it. And so I do feel like we should face this kind of thing. She can be a great writer with some horrible, horrible racist ideas. But the fact that I've never heard anyone even mention her anti-Asian sentiments is kind of beyond the pale. And I almost fell into that trap of, well, it's not the author who thinks that, it's the character who's saying that. Except for the last time it appears in here, the character who originally said it is dead. And this is not a voiceover from the grave. So this is absolutely something that Virginia Woolf carries and thinks. And so it was horribly disappointing, not just the book and me not getting on the book, but also just recognizing that she had some really big problems with Asians as well as Jewish people. And she has a lot of class issues, and I don't think that makes her a bad writer. And I'm not canceling her. You can't cancel her. She's dead. But it does mean that I go into her books with a little less starry-eyed glamour and it takes a little bit of the shine off of her. But you know what? I actually think that's okay. I don't think that we should glamorize or put on pedestals anyone. anyone. So that's my feelings about The Lighthouse. Okay, then Leo and I, and this was with Elizabeth of Bookish North, and she had very similar reactions. I'll put a link to her channel below so you can check out her videos. We're reading all of Virginia Woolf's work in publication order, and we'll continue on. Then my other buddy read is with Leo of A Little Book Life, and this is a private view that we finished. Look at that, gorgeous. I just love these covers, as I mentioned before. Anita really does male characters very well. I think she does the male characters that she would like to interact with. She does kind of an idealized male character. Her male characters are sensitive, they're thoughtful, they're interesting. They just have something about them when she centers them, when they're the protagonist. Something about, there's like an interiority to her men that I find very, very interesting and I really enjoy. And this was no exception. This is the 14th of the books that we've read. And in this one, we open with meeting George Bland. Great name, right? George is really in the throes of grief for his very best friend in the whole world, Putnam. They have this beautiful, really companionable, loving relationship, but it's not sexual in any way, shape, or form. It's thoughtful. They enjoyed each other, and they were looking forward to. This is the part that kills me. They were looking forward to retiring together and traveling the world. And then Putnam, who otherwise was perfectly healthy, just up and dies. He ends up leaving George with some money. And George is retired, and now he's at a loss of what to do. And this kind of throws him into a tailspin of grief, but very subtle grief, not the kind of like put down the nightshades and lay in bed all day, but more not thinking as thoughtfully as you should, and not being aware of everything, and kind of walking in a fog and kind of being dislocated out of your own life. And he gets a jolt when a young woman is in their building who says that she needs to stay, that she's supposed to be staying at the apartment of the neighbor across the hall, and that they're expecting her, but they're not there. Now, he knows that the neighbors are gone on vacation, but he just, again, not thinking, he gives her the key because she knows their name and she says enough things, but there's something absolutely off about this young woman. And she ends up being a catalyst for him to explore some maybe self-destructive, nihilistic tendencies that he may have. And to imagine a different life than he normally has. And that's always been the challenge with Anita Brookner for me, is both the lack of imagination of the main characters, of what their lives could be other than the lot that they are given, but also the inability to kind of grab it. So it's always a lot of hand wringing and I wish I could, but also within very limited span or scope of ideas. Well, this kind of blows his mind, and all of a sudden his entire world is upside down. I think that this was such a great story. It's such a good Anita Brookner story. I think it dragged a little bit. I think there's a little too much hand-wringing and internalized angst about some decisions. But other than that, it was great. And the ending was just glorious. So this is the second book in a row that has won me over and that had an amazing ending. I know Leo really liked it, so go check out his video about this as well. Okay, then I did in audio Enchanted April by Elizabeth Van Arnim. I've known about this book forever and I just have not gotten around to it, but I am in such an emotional turmoil about not being able to travel. So anytime I can find a very good book about travel, a story set where people are leaving their homes and they're going and exploring, and it's beautiful, not like disaster tourism or scary or frightening, but something that's really life affirming, I'm grabbing it with both hands. So in this story, this was written in 1922, and it's the story of really two women. One is Lottie and the other is Rose. And they kind of know each other-ish, not very well at all, but they come across an advertisement in the paper, basically looking for people to rent a castle in what we know to be Portofino. And Lottie is so, becomes obsessed with this because she's in kind of an unhappy marriage, as well as Rose. So she is kind of a really interesting character, really funny, a little flighty, but she convinces Rose to go in on it with her. And then there are two other women that also agree to this castle for a month-long vacation. So they leave dark and dreary London and they go to beautiful, amazing Portofino and stay in this castle. It's light, it's romantic. What really is the center stage here is the atmosphere and the characters. So it's kind of like a comedy of manners. I will say that one of the things that, if you're looking for these women to kind of blossom into their full potential and full independent potential, you will be disappointed. It's very, they blossom, but within the confines of the existing roles that they have. And they kind of deepen those relationships and deepen those holes. So it's romantic in that sense. But as a feminist, it's not like the full thing I was hoping for. But, 1922, you take what you can. But I just thought this was charming, just so delightful, so lovely. The spirit with which being someplace else and looking out at these beautiful vistas, it was something that it was palpable. I could feel it. I kind of took it in, and it definitely made me want to add Portofino to my list of Italian places to visit. Then I read a very big surprise to me. This is Elizabeth Taylor, not that Elizabeth Taylor, but the writer Elizabeth Taylor, and this is In a Summer Season. This is a Virago Modern classic, and I've never read any Elizabeth Taylor, and I think I was expecting something different. I was expecting a kind of serious, somber, highly literary. Maybe Rebecca West, Elizabeth Bowen kind of style. But instead, this is more akin to what I just read, Elizabeth Van Arnim, kind of lighter. And this is way saucier. This was written in the 60s, published in the 60s. It's saucier, jauntier, really funny. A lot of comedy, a lot of really funny situations. We meet the Kate. And Kate is a woman who she's in her second marriage. Her first husband died, and she has her children are still in the home with her aunt. And she's remarried, and she's married a younger man, and Dermot is not, he's just not up to snuff. But the sex is amazing, and they have this connection. And so hilarity ensues from there. We get this house that everyone is living in, and all of these things that are happening in this home. And we also get Charles, who comes back from a tour in Bahrain, and Charles was her first husband's best friend. And I think with the return of him, she starts to look at her life in a little bit of a different view. This is also a book that I enjoyed very much, and that ending in this book was fantastic, very, very satisfying. I just really enjoyed this book, and I'm definitely going to be looking out for more of her work for sure. So then I had this amazing situation happen last night where I cleared the decks except for something that I've been reading for ages, and there's no way I'm going to finish it. So I call it clearing the deck because this is kind of a perennial read. I'll tell you about that in what I'm currently reading. And so I put on Instagram that I had 3 books that I was looking at, and was there a preference? What did people think? And I picked the one that I think no one picked, but it was only I think it's like 92 pages, 96 pages long. Yeah, about 80 pages. And this is The Lady and the Little Fox Fur by Violette LeDuc. And this is translated by Derek Coltman. Beautiful, beautiful little cover. I really do love these Penguin European Writers editions. Just beautiful little French flaps, beautiful covers. They just have been doing such a great job with these. And the cover is so perfect for this book. This is a story of an older woman. She's in her 60s, and she is horribly impoverished. She is on her last bit of money. She sold almost everything that she owns, and she goes out during the day and walks around Paris to keep herself warm. We're in the winter, and she's quite literally starving to death. She has 7 potatoes that have to last her for a certain amount of time, and she counts time by these coffee beans that she has and the sound of the metro train going by. She's very interesting. She's kind of a daydreamer. She has flights of fancy, and she walks around Paris, and Paris is almost a character in this book. Paris is a little indifferent, kind of the mean girl, cold, indifferent, but she has so much love for Paris, and she has these spots that she goes to, and she has her routes that she takes. And she has these fantasies of people, and she sees people, but she's almost in essence invisible because both of her age and because of her poverty. The writing is really beautiful. It's very modern, very modernist. So very stream of conscience, almost like a fever dream. You can feel that she's getting a little delirious. So not everything kind of clicks and comes together. Sometimes it's fragmentary, but we get what's happening. Her life changes in a very interesting way when one morning she is so thirsty that she gets up very, very early and goes out looking for oranges. And she's looking in the trash for oranges. And in doing so, finds a fox fur stole that's rancid, it smells, it's been thrown away. But this unlocks something for her. It gives her a new idea. She's got a hustle about her. She's got plans, and it was so visceral. Reading this book was visceral. I got incredibly hungry, and I also got very, very cold. The writing is it's vivid. You're there. But what's so interesting to me as I've been thinking about it since I finished it, and I knocked it out last night, just completely could not stop reading it, is, it's tender and it's heart-wrenching. I mean, the way she writes about hunger, this is going to stay with me. But this is also the antithesis of Mrs. Dalloway. So Mrs. Dalloway is going out by Virginia Woolf, which I just read last month. She's going out and she's walking around London, but she's walking around London being recognized and seen because she's a woman of privilege, and she's running errands because she wants to, not because she has to. And her errands are about luxury. And she has, the space and mind to be contemplating the future and thinking about things. And the things she's worried about are cultural, social, standing types of things, as opposed to our main character here, who is, as I mentioned, invisible. So she's walking around Paris, and she has the same love of Paris that Mrs. Dalloway has of London, but she's not having that same, she's not getting back the same adoration that she's giving. So that was quite interesting in and of itself. The second thing I found so interesting, and again, connections this week, right, is with Anita Brookner. So my biggest problem with Anita Brookner is the lack of imagination that her characters have for envisioning what else could exist for them. So they just sit in this well of loneliness and wittering away the hours of the day. You've heard me talk about that. Now, how will I get through the hours before I can go to sleep? So it's always this idea. And here this woman has nothing but hours. That's the only thing she has. And she leverages them, and she walks, and she's engaging, and she watches people, and she's observing, and she's thinking, and she's taking an active participation in her own life, where it probably would have been just easier for her to just lay in her basically empty apartment and just release and let go and die. So I just found that so fascinating. I'm going to think about this for a long, long time. So I absolutely adored it. I think you have to be okay with not a lot of plot and interiority. And you have to be okay with kind of this modernist Virginia Woolfy stream of consciousness type of writing. But Mel said in one of her reviews, she goes, "So I loved it, but if you're a nitpicker, then don't read it." So I will give her full credit, but I would agree here. If you're a nitpicker, you may not like this. You have to kind of jump into the stream and go with it. And it's painful and it's sad, but it's also funny and inspiring. And the zest of life is pulses through this book. So I loved it. Okay, so then what am I currently reading? So the one that I don't consider when I said I cleared the decks, this is the except for. This is volume 3 of In Search of Lost Time, Marcel, Proust, Guermantes way. I am doing well. I am reading this on a daily basis, and I'm continuing to read, and I'm actually proud of my progress here. Even though it looks like I haven't gotten anywhere, I actually have. So we'll continue on. But I want to read, I received such glowing reviews about these two books. This is the summer book by Tove Jansen, and this is translated by, again for Women in Translation Month, translated by Thomas Teal. And I've heard such amazing things that I want to read this. Then the next one is Bonjour, Tristesse, and this is by Françoise Sagan. And this is translated by Heather Lloyd. And Rachel Cusk did the introduction to this, which is exciting. Oh, forgot to mention, Deborah Levy did the introduction to this, which I read after I finished it, and it was delightful. This was a fantastic introduction, FYI. So yeah, looking forward to both of these. I've heard amazing things about them. And then I just have a ton of books for Women in Translation Month that I'm not going to be able to get to. But I'm going to switch it over for Shorty September, and I'm going to try to do a TBR for that, or at least a pile of possibilities, as Kazan from Always Doing says. So that's it for me. Please let me know. Have you read any of these books? What are your thoughts? And as always, we are still in a global pandemic. Please maintain safe social distance. Wear your mask, wash your hands, and do not touch your face. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.